Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, ready to rumble here on the Investigative Journal, rumble with the Jesuits, and figure out exactly what the hell's going on in this country. Isn't it crazy? I think it's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I've been around a while. I've been around, as Al Pacino would say. Been around the block a little bit. Greg Anthony here, Investigative Journal. Sorry I wasn't with you last week for a number of days. I'm sure a lot of you didn't give a damn. But anyway, I'm battling some kind of crazy, it's not the flu, but man, when you got weather like this, they're manipulating it, right? Is there any really proof that they do that? I'm sure we could find weather manipulation done back in the 1940s with the military. But, you know, to prove all the little things that they do to us is like a task that sometimes seems overwhelming, right? We can prove they didn't go to the moon. Right, but then they call us crazy. We can prove that NASA is lying to us about the shape of the Earth, but they call us crazy. We can say that the Vatican-led New World Order is behind a lot of this push for socialism in this country, because why? Oh, they'll call you crazy, but think about it. They were the ones that created it, if you do your history. And then the old story comes again. No freedom of the press in America. Jeff Zuckerberg, or whatever his name is, who runs CNN, went to Washington and got the First Amendment Award. Why? You know, he got it because he doesn't want to tell the truth, and he basically just gives the left-wing version. Now, the right wing is really up in arms. There is no First Amendment. Look at what MSNBC, CNN are doing to us. But none of them realize that people like us have no rights in this country to speak our mind, because they are just as quick on both sides to dismiss any truthful things that really happen. And they are the best. I love it because let me give you two examples. You'll listen to Tucker Carlson. Now, I like him. If I was a right-wing advocate for freedom, as he puts it, I'd love him. I, in fact, agree with a lot he says. But he fails to get to the bottom of issues that we do here. And what really happens then? It becomes a left-wing, right-wing battle of who is taking away the First Amendment rights of American citizens. Well, my contention is that both of them are taking it away because they don't want to get to the bottom of a lot of stories. And if they did, it would change the face of America, not into a socialist direction, but for the common good of everyone, so that the republic, capitalism, all of the things that our Constitution stands for would ring true, because we would get rid of the lies, the deceit, and all of the things that are happening behind the scenes that both of these groups, the left and the right wing, keep from us. It's not a battle, folks, of conservatism, nationalism versus liberalism and globalism, because that battle's already been won. And you know as well as I do, globalism, the Jesuits, and their push to change this country is going to happen. The battle really is that we cannot get to the bottom of what's going on. We cannot get to the bottom in exposing both of these groups for keeping a story, keeping the truth from you. That is the issue. Now, I can talk logically with either side, and I've said many times, why don't you put the Vatican story on the table? Why don't you really get to the bottom of who's behind what's going on here? Why don't we really get to the bottom of pedophilia? Why don't we really get to the bottom of why our borders are open? And why don't we really say the truth that this fight between the left and right, whether it be in politics, you see it very often, what do you think Congress doesn't get anything done for? And what do you think the left-wing and right-wing journalists now on CNN and Fox are fighting and having basically a discussion that Europeans were having a long time ago? And I remember when I was in Rome in the 80s, I said, man, this is interesting that these people here, each group has their own separate idea and newspaper. Christian Democrats had their own paper. The fascists had their own. The communists had their own. The moderates had their own. The liberals had their own. And it's just the same now here in America. So are we progressing? No. There is no honest debate. I don't care how, for example, I'm using just two journalists as examples. Or, let's call them what they are, cable news broadcasters, following the cable news cycle every day. And when I look at both of them on the left and the right, I can look and say, well, if I didn't realize what the real story was, I'd surely follow Tucker Carlson. Yes, I would. Because he's a little bit more rational than what's coming out of the left wing today. But that's the strategy. Because as you see, this socialist kind of push in America is being accepted by millions and millions of younger Americans who have been given a dish of Jesuitism at schools. And what is that? What have they done at these universities? They've taken away freedom of speech. That is what's going on here. Yeah, so let me finish this segment real quickly here before I get on to some more important things. Yes, the First Amendment, the freedom of speech is dead. And let me tell you something, I knew about that 20 years ago when I tried to get this story into the mainstream. Now you're hearing it just for about the last year or two from especially Fox News and CNN, who go back and forth and say, for example, the First Amendment is dead because look at what MSNBC and CNN do. They don't tell the truth. Fake news. Well, let me tell you guys, I knew the First Amendment was dead a long, long time ago. And let's tell the truth for once. Why don't you ever cover the Vatican story the way it should be and do the history like it should be? And all these historians that come on these shows, CNN has theirs, Fox has theirs. They're, nice people, but they don't go deep enough. They're really happy when they get a book on, the New York Times bestseller. And my thinking is, once it gets there, my goodness, I prescribe to what Mark Twain said. Thank God for illiteracy and all the bad books you don't have to read. Not one will ever get to the bottom of this story, really where it comes from. That's the key. And you know something? They took the keys away a long time ago. And let's get on to something else. Okay, one last thing. I think I should explain something about the First Amendment before we move on, because a lot of people have a misconception of it. They think that anything goes, any speech goes. No, that's not it. There are many, many limitations on the First Amendment, and those limitations are grounded in some pretty good ideas. The simple thing you hear all the time is you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Why? Because somebody may run out and kill themselves or be trampled on, etc., etc. So there are a lot of things that are limited, and when you discuss the First Amendment, you can take it example by example. The idea that you hear now, fake news, hate speech. Hate speech is an interesting category of First Amendment, and it is disallowed. What I mean by hate speech, people may say, I cannot criticize the policies of the Catholic Church. I cannot criticize. No, that's not hate speech. Hate speech takes into consideration one thing. Well, the speech that I give, the words that I say, cause imminent harm to somebody. Not harm that could be surmised that takes place 2 months later, but when I'm speaking at that particular moment, will that cause somebody listening to create a dangerous situation for other people? So hate speech has been the idea that you hear hate speech all the time. The broad brush of hate speech is really taking away criticism from the elite who don't want to be criticized, or the Congress who doesn't want to be criticized. You see, the idea of the First Amendment, if you really understand it, is a great one. Let's take the Covington kids, okay? You know now that Lynn Woods, the defense attorney, a well-respected defense attorney who knows his way around the First Amendment and is very articulate, a very smooth operator, a very good defense attorney. And I guess if I was looking for an attorney and I had a First Amendment argument, I'd go to him. Very smooth talker, nice dresser, intelligent, has had some really good clients, and he specializes in this area of the law. So the Covington kids have now, or Mr. Sandman, Christopher Sandman, has taken on Mr. Wood as his attorney. Okay, so like I said, I got a little distracted there due to my service animals, First Amendment animals. Just a little aside. I really don't like the service dog laws that are in the country today. Basically, anybody can get one. I was on an airplane once when a guy had a snake as a service animal. Scared the living hell out of me. And another time I was on with someone who appeared to be a lot more sane than me. And the reason I'm saying this is I love dogs. I've got 6, but I don't travel with them when I go to the airport or on trains, planes. I take them in my car. But if I was going on a bus, they wouldn't come. And the reason is it's very uncomfortable for them to be around all these humans. Who knows what they would catch? The diseases they might come home with, So I'm very protective of my service dogs because they serve me in a way that's very instrumental in my private life. And so when it comes to a service animal, I believe that there should be stricter regulations to it because as I was talking to a vet or a doctor, I've talked to many in my life over the years when I had horses and cows, and I grew up on a farm, so I've been pretty close to animals all my life. And let me tell you, they're a lot nicer to talk to than a lot of human beings I run into. And some of the things I really miss in life are those nights when I'd sit on some straw or some hay. When you do that, you have that tendency, I don't know if you ever spent a lot of time in a barn, but you have a tendency to pick up a piece of hay and just put it in your mouth. Isn't that interesting? And it tastes good. Straw, not so much. But anyway, that's just little intricacies of barn life. I can remember one time when I had some racehorses, and I was about 3 months out of my life. I didn't have enough money to pay for enough grooms at the time, so I had to stay in the barn with them, and I slept in a little tack room. Tack room means where all the saddles were. And I was quite comfortable. In fact, slept very well because at night you can hear every movement of your horses that I had 7 or 8 at the time stalled. And I could hear them whinny. I could hear them blow through their nose, which was very calming sound at night. And so I slept pretty good, even though I was sleeping with the horses. But let me tell you this, that I remember when I used to have them, and I've got off on a tangent here, which is always good. In the world we live in, we're talking about so many things that we can't control. It's time to just sometimes get off so you get to know a little bit about me. But I can tell you, when I used to get nervous or feel a little anxiety-ridden, and I had my little barn and little house, I'd walk out no matter if it was cold or warm or whatever. And you go into that barn with those animals and they keep it warm, and nothing better than to feed them. And I used to give them a nice warm meal at night, and you got to know how to do it for horses. And then I'd listen to them eat and just relax for an hour. No music, no outside BS from the world. And let me tell you something. Calms your stomach down, calms your mind down, and it gives you a sense of really who you are and what the world is really about. And I think moving to finish up with First Amendment, what I'm getting at is the limitations on it are, to me, more interesting than the categorical right to free speech, right? Because free speech is a right, but there are things that you have to know about it so that you can live in kind of a harmonious way with your fellow man. And that's not going on much in America now, is it? You know, I think we're all free to express our opinions about politics, about religion, about things that sometimes are upsetting. And free speech is allowed, and sometimes what's said is upsetting. But remember, what is upsetting to some can be turned into hate speech by the very same people to limit speech unfairly. And that's where I like to draw the line. What is unfair? What is an unfair limitation of speech? And as we were talking about that kid, that Sandman, I think it's Christopher Sandman, or I'll just call him Sandman, the young high school kid. And we all know who wore the MAGA hat. When you really look at that the scenario and what CNN, the Washington Post, and other outlets did to him, is they really went overboard without knowing what the real situation was. And so that kind of speech I don't like, and I would defend him in a minute. And like I said, he is a great lawyer, and I hope he takes these people to task. And I'm not even getting into all of the internet stuff about whether this was a staged event. And that's a whole different ballgame. But let's just look at it for what it is and what the Constitution says and what First Amendment really is. And CNN and those outlets did not have a right to do that to this kid. And I hope that they really, you know, they're going to come in and use the New York Times versus Sullivan case. But I hope this time that case will not hold up. And I tell you, they don't deserve to win this case. That was not fair what they did to that kid. They did not report it correctly. And there's so many others. And you see, you learn as a journalist that you have a why when a person is a public figure, not like Mr. Sandman. You can say just about whatever you want, and slander and libel and all that have been brought by politicians, but you don't hear it very often because there's a wide latitude. If it's done with malicious intent, that's a different story, but we'll get into that when you decide to go to law school. You'll find it very interesting. At least I did. It shows you a lot about my life. But anyway, the First Amendment is something that is really, you need to really respect and realize that, I'm going to end it with this, that it's being taken away from you. It's been taken away from me years ago. Because this, although I'm sitting here telling people, this story needs to be told to millions. And just as all of the other stories that CNN and Fox News and Washington Post and the New York Times tell, that's where free speech becomes chilling. It has a chilling effect when it's controlled, and that's what it's done here, because not many people hear it. It's like you're in the forest. It's the same story. If a tree falls down in the forest and you don't hear it, did it fall down? Well, yeah, it did. But you need to hear it to really understand it, right? That's not a great analogy, but what the hell? So let's stop with free speech. But as we move forward, we look at, and I'm going to end this half hour with a story that broke last week. I'm getting like cable news. I'm following the cable news stories. Cable news, it's a news cycle. It's inbred in you as a journalist. You can't get away from it. It's a sickness. You got to know. You got to tell. You got to talk. And the big story was this scandal in Hollywood about these kids getting special privileges to get into universities, and actually the rich parents with a lot of clout, a lot from Hollywood, a lot from the business world, were using a man who was bribing schools. You're talking millions of dollars. 50 people have been indicted so far. And the scandal goes, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But, excuse me, but the real point of the story is that it's coming to the forefront. This goes on all the time. Don't you think that rich donors at Harvard, you know what Harvard's you know how much they were donated last year? In the billions. And don't you think that a kid that has a father given $20 million is going to get preference over someone else? Of course. So, this is going on all the time. This is nothing new. But the thing that is new is that it's come to the forefront that there were actual bribery, actual federal charges. We got 2 actresses charged. We have the guy, the ringleader, who's pled guilty to a number of charges. This is, wire fraud, etc., bribery in the millions of dollars. That's the difference here. So, of course, it's going to get play all over the world, and everybody's going to have their opinion. But the real situation is that the educational system has been deteriorating for years. And I have a whole take on this, that's a bit different. I don't really think, I don't think the education is worth it anymore in this country. To be honest with the college education, specific schooling on certain topics. Of course, if you want to get become a doctor or something, an engineer, certain things like this. But when you get into the college education and its ideas and the thing, it's really, you never know what kind of professor you're going to get. So the educational system in this country has deteriorated. This is just another example of it. How really it has no meaning. These kids, people say they weren't taught a lesson because of what their parents did. We'll get into that in the next half hour perhaps. But what I'm saying is they were taught the truth. That's the way the world is. The more money you got, the more you get. You think it's any different in Washington? Think it's any different in your state house in Sacramento, California, or in Springfield, Illinois? It's who you know. Look, I learned that a long time ago when I grew up in Chicago as a young kid. In the Mayor Daley organization, all my friends were friends of Mayor Daley's. So I know what it is. That's where you grow up. Now, is that a good lesson? Bad lesson? Well, you know what? Parents should not bribe people to get into college. You got to draw a line somewhere. But the world is a pay-for-play situation. It's this is like nothing new. Everything is, this big scandal. It's been going on for hundreds of years. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, boys and girls, if you were with me in the first half hour, we totally devoured the First Amendment. I think we put it right. If you can't explain it simply in 30 seconds, what's really going on in this country, I'll give you a minute. You really don't know. And the First Amendment really gives us an idea of where we are at. And I think it's very simple. If the First Amendment was adhered to, a lot of the stuff that's going on in our political world, in our journalistic world, even on the internet, would be much, much different. Because the idea of people arguing and getting angry over ideas is ridiculous. I mean, there's so many of them in the world that are so interesting. You need to take a view of kind of like when you were a kid, how fun it was to hear something you didn't know about, and you didn't disagree or agree because you weren't sure. But as people get older, they become sure of themselves about things that are ridiculous, without facts, without anything. And I think it's a sign of, a person trying to express his own ego, express his own identity. But you have to take a step back and think, what kind of identity do you want to have? I mean, what's really important? And I think as we move into a new world, and I think this is what it is. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was much happier before the internet. The internet has made me a slug on the couch, or a slug in my chair. It's so simple. Hey, why do I have to go to Tahiti? I can just find it on the internet. And imagine when you get all the new technology, the robotized world and the artificial intelligent world, and you put that cap on your head and you'll create a 3D world. Well, why the hell do you need to really go see the world? And the real point is, I was much happier prior to the internet, when you actually, in fact, prior to the cell phone. And people would say, well, that's crazy. But no, I can remember. Let's do an example here. How many of you older people remember taking a cross-country trip across America without a GPS and no cell phone and no AAA that would come to your rescue if you got a flat tire? Nothing. You just had a map. You had a few quarters in your pocket in case you needed to get to a payphone. And you had a jack. You'd always check the back of your car. Do I have a jack? Do I have, something to get the lug nuts off? Do I have a few necessary things to make sure my car is going to run? And back then, it was a simple carburetor car that wasn't run by computers. It was simple. You turn a key. I've been driving a car now. I haven't had a key in years. You press a button and you got this little thing you hold. I mean, I don't like it, but that's the way the world is. I'd rather have a key, turn the key, pull the key out. That's me. But if you older people remember, a cross-country trip was more of an adventure than a planned, excursion by, put the GPS on, let the little girl talking to you tell you where to go. What fun is that? But anyway, there's people that are now, getting to the driving age or even past that have never experienced that beautiful adventure of changing your own flat tire, actually having to stop at a gas station and ask for directions. And thirdly, have to sit with the person next to you in the car while they take out a little pen and start going, okay, we got to turn, the Route 66 goes to, here, and don't miss that. And somehow, some way, I remember making it from L.A. to Miami, and then Miami back to L.A. Somehow, some way, and I even stopped at other places. I mean, it was a fun time. Now it's like, holy shit, don't trust the map and yourself. Trust that little GPS that you got there. And then you got a cell phone, and if your car breaks down, you got a flat tire, hell, I can't fix that. I'm going to call AAA, and if not, hell, I'll just sleep in the car till the morning, because nobody even knows where the jack is in their car. That's really the way it is. And then I heard this conversation the other day about, and call me old-fashioned, but I opposed this idea. The guy was saying on TV, is a, kind of a talk show host, news anchor. He was saying, oh, it's going to be so great when people don't have to drive their cars and it's automatically done for them. And there'll be so many less accidents. There might be less accidents. I don't know. Not a case of me. If I was the driver in everybody's car in this world, there wouldn't be one accident because, I can't say it because I got to knock on wood. You know what that means. So I've done pretty good. And that's because I'm a careful driver. I've had a few little... I'm not even going to get... No, not even one. But what I'm saying is all of a sudden... Okay, so stick with me on this. Enough rambling, right? But I'm going to take you right back to 9/11. Oh, isn't that going to shock your conscience? We've forgotten even about 9/11. And, there's so much going on in the world. And stick with me this week because I've got a lot to get off my chest, so to speak. And a lot of things that'll make you think twice about what you're really doing in this world. And what I mean by that is, How are we ever going to get to the bottom of anything if we can't even solve 9/11? And what I mean by that is I'm thinking about it because I spent 2 years of my life interviewing people, talking about it after 9/11 occurred, and came to the conclusion that the government was full of shit. And it was a manufactured crisis, as they say now, you know. But listen, it was a methodical deception that was going on in this world. And it started with, we're living in a post-9/11 world. And there's a lot of great information out there since. And I've found something that's interesting. And let me read this to you. On Thursday, September 9th, 2015, Mark, this gentleman, and I'll get his name. You know, it's so hard to get names on the internet. Everybody goes by a different name, and it probably doesn't matter because how you going to prove it anyway? You could say, my name is John Doe, and everybody will believe it. But anyway, the information is the key, right? And he interviewed an author, Rebecca Roth, about her book called methodicaldeception.com. Go there, methodicaldeception.com, if you want to figure out why we're in the situation we are today, because most people right now don't even give a damn about 9/11. New information she has recovered about the false flag event. It's going to shock you. Maybe not me. I think I've read most everything about it. This bombshell destroys the official story forever. Israeli Mossad involvement, well, Mossad and the CIA, the German intelligence, they're all working together. You are invited to listen or rip this up and say it doesn't exist, and I'm going to play it for you. And let's see what we have here. It's a long one, but I'm tired of talking, so let's see what we have. Now, before I get into this, it's talking about Israeli Mossad involvement. Now, you know as well as I do that when you talk about Israeli Mossad, the CIA, they're all basically Catholics in action. The CIA, Mossad, they're all run by Rome. And if you don't understand that, you got to know there's papal court Jews out there. So don't blame the Jewish people, and don't blame me. I'm half Jewish. Here we go. There might be a little bit of, music, and so bear with me, have a cigarette. When's the last time anybody ever said that? Have a smoke, relax.
I'm going to take you to Dick Cheney. Fasten your seatbelt. And this is going to absolutely blow you away. I would like you, if you can do this on your computer, to go to methodicaldeception.com. And when you open that up, on the navigation bar, you'll see where it says resources. And you'll want to click on that resources. And then there's a big box that says about the Israeli art students at the World Trade Center. Click here. Click on that and tell me when you get to that page that has some photographs, because...
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the Israeli art students. Okay, this is something that I've talked to a few times in the past about, and they were up in one of the floors of 9/11 that are vacant. And most people don't realize that much of the Twin Towers was hollow. The hollow towers. Let's get back to it.
This is the elephant in the room that nobody wanted to talk about. And this is one of the documents, a 61-page DEA document that I went over and over and over and connected Israeli Mossad bomb experts to an art group that were traveling around the United States, and to an art group that gave themselves the name of Gelatin. So are you there?
I'm there.
So you got those pictures. Okay, now I'm going to take you to Dick Cheney. Just listen up. You're looking at those pictures. Those are some Israeli art students that came from a foreign country, and their art project was called B-Thing. They called their team the Gelatin Group. And just so you understand this, gelatin is often referred to gelignite or blasting gelatin. It's also referred to as blasting jelly, but gelatin, and they later on changed their name because people started waking up to this. So they named their name Gelatin. They called their art project the B Thing, and you will see on the left-hand side a photograph of the title page of their book. And what the B Thing was, there was a group called the Lower Manhattan Cultural Center that was renting the 91st floor or allowed to live on the 91st floor. These foreign art students, and some of them were...
Okay, folks, so if you've never been in the World Trade Center building, the most important thing to think about here is the elevator system they had. And I've been in that building a number of times, and here's how it works. You get on one elevator, and it bypasses so many floors, and it takes you way to the top. But the real truth of the matter is, I never stepped foot on every floor in that in the World Trade Center. And one time I talked to a person that stated that there's no way to get off the elevator at the 54th floor. So the point is, that building had a lot of hollow floors, and that's why these supposed art students that could get into America and easily, I mean, anybody can get in, right? What happened was they rented or lived there for a reason. And if the building was, as they said, 98% occupied, this would have never happened. Here we go.
We're connected to a group of traveling art students that were all over the country that the DEA found out about because they were going door to door to some of their agents' homes and their offices, and some of the offices were not public locations, so they were like, who are these people? There's Israeli students trying to sell us art. This was just a smokescreen, so you wouldn't go to where we're about to go. Now the guy in the pink shirt, he's on the top right-hand side, kind of a pink shirt on, he has repelling gear on. They removed a window. This was their art project. They put a wooden balcony out, and they had photographs taken via a helicopter that was rented by their sponsor from the Lower Manhattan Cultural Center. And that particular gentleman also had a big party to celebrate this event, and he rented part of the top floors of the Millennium Hotel. You'll remember that from 9/11, and who was there, the Bush relative, and took pictures and had a big champagne party watching this, okay? Look behind the gentleman in the pink shirt. You're going to see two big bold numbers. It says BB18. Those are fuse holders. Now look at all three pictures, and look at how many boxes of plastic fuse holders that can be used for remote control demolition. And ask yourself, why would art students from Israel and Austria be having thousands of fuse holders? This building was built in the early 1970s. They weren't electricians. They weren't redoing all of the electricity in that building. You know, think about this. Okay, so I get this book out and
I think they were basically wiring it to explode, right? If you follow how that building went down. All right, so here we go, Sean Hannity, all of you people out there, you great investigators. Come on. Why doesn't somebody cover this? Because it doesn't fit the narrative, right? Doesn't fit your narrative of America. You're never going to admit that 9/11 was an inside job. You never, and you're going to call everybody that does a tinfoil hat. But let me tell you something, my friend. You're totally wrong. Let's go back.
I'm waiting for my shipment of books to show up, and I literally had a voice say to me, look into this. Those fuses, by the way, come from a company called Lytel Fuse, Littel, Fuse Company. They're located in Chicago.
Don't you love these? You know, we got a lot of smart American investigators. Unfortunately, they don't work for the FBI. Otherwise, Clinton would be behind bars.
Chicago. And some little voice said to me, take a look into this Littel Fuse Company, where all of those fuse holders behind those artists are. And now some of those artists are guaranteed Mossad bomb experts. And that's in the DEA document that you can read. So I find out that Littel Company is a subsidiary of a corporation called Tracor, Tracor. Now, Tracor, they went bankrupt and split their company. They were a government contractor. They split them off into Tracor Aviation, Littel Fuse, and Tracor Defense Holdings. They're based in Austin, Texas. They were bought out by Westmark Systems. Bobby Ray Inman was the chairman of the Westmark at a point. Then Westmark kind of started losing it, and Tracor bought them back. Tracor bought out a company called Vitro, which used to be the Kellex Company. Let me tell you about Kellex Company. The Kellex Corporation was a wholly owned subsidiary of M.W. Kellogg, as in cereal, you know that guy, Kellogg Company. Kellex was formed in 1942 that so Kellogg's operation relating to the Manhattan Project could be kept separate and secret, Kel meaning Kellogg and X meaning secret. The new company's goal was to design a facility for the production of enriched uranium through a gaseous diffusion technique. In gaseous diffusion, isotopes of uranium-235 could be separated from uranium-238 by turning uranium metal into uranium hexafluoride gas and straining it through a barrier material. Now, this is kind of interesting too, so for those of you who remember that originally the first responders were getting calls that there was a missile launched from the Woolworth building. The newly formed Kellex Company's original headquarters were in the Woolworth building in Lower Manhattan. I know, it's just another coincidence, isn't it? They later on moved to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. But now, the Kellex Company, you will know them today. Here we are, fasten your seatbelts, as Halliburton.
Dick Cheney's old company.
There you go. I told you I was going to take you to Dick Cheney.
Not a bad analysis. Go to that website, Methodical Deceptions. You know, a girl like that, she, and excuse me for being old-fashioned when I said that, with all due respect, she is bright. It's not easy to go from corporation to corporation. This stuff is, that's how they hide things. You know, try to figure out how the Jesuits own 50% of Bank of America. That'll make your head spin. So, I played this for a reason, and the reason is we've all forgotten about 9/11. It's as if it didn't happen. And the whole populace goes, well, 50% in New York believed it was an inside job right after it happened. But how many of those people could stick around or make that case? Nobody. So we all lose hope. But we know, whether we can prove, whether the whole world agrees with you or not, I am convinced that you as an individual, if you looked into 9/11 as much as I have, can say without a shadow of doubt, when you put your head on that final resting place and someone asks you, what do you think about 9/11, Greg? I'll say, give me a glass of wine and I'll tell you it was an inside job. And I would go to my grave happy. Because the facts, man, just are there for you. But if you understand, it's kind of like a wall of deceit, deception, and untruth stands between you and ever living a normal life. once you start looking into things. And so most people, when they say, not, listen to every news broadcaster out there, they still think, they'll still tell you 9/11 was an attack by 3 Muslims with box cutters. And as the years go on, they don't get into the facts anymore, do they? They kind of just rely on the generalities, whether it's a left-wing news organization or a right-wing one. None of them argue about that, do they? No. They're in total agreement about that. Because they're in total agreement Rome controls the world. And they're in total agreement with a satanic pope. That's how deep it gets. And when I put on something, when I say, truth seekers, when you come to this show, even truth seekers fear to tread here, they do, because once you mention satanic, they get a little frightened, Don't be. Because the only way you can defeat this kind of evil is by understanding it. Then it's not so scary. Because once you understand it, it's really a frivolous, goofy bunch of people when you think about it. Just they have a lot of money, a lot of power, can hire people to kill you. That's all they can do. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal. Hopefully one of those satanic people won't kill me. I don't think so. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.